Hey guys, to some people, my name is Sunny, and to some others, my name is Yue Zhongqi. Throughout my life, I've always had a question in my mind that I could never seem to figure out. And that is, where do I really belong in this world? It is in our nature as humans to demand to belong to something, whether it be a home, a friend group, or a culture. But what if all your life you felt as if you didn't belong anywhere? Well, I've always thought that I didn't quite fit in, but not in the sense that I was left out socially, in spite of the fact that I joke about being socially awkward all the time to my friends, but more in the sense that I was somewhat of, well, the oddball in every situation, if you must. Allow me to explain. In China, where I was born, I stand out as being an English speaker and having a Western cultural background. And here, I stand out as someone who speaks Mandarin and has a Chinese cultural background. In terms of music taste, I stand out as being a metalhead at heart. And in a group of people, I literally stand out as, if you haven't quite noticed yet, I'm a little bit tall. I'm always that one kid who isn't quite like the others. I was the black sheep. I was the anomaly. And because of this, I didn't fit in. As I mentioned previously, I was born in China, but for all my life, I've been on the move. I could probably go on for a solid hour about all the places I've lived in and how they've impacted my view of the world. But lest I cause you to fall asleep due to boredom, I'll try to keep it simple. Over the course of the 18 years of my life so far, I've moved from Beijing to Singapore to Shanghai, then to Singapore again, to America, back to Shanghai, and then eventually here to Oakville. To give you some numbers, that's a total of 6 moves to 5 very different places that I've had to call home, in 4 countries across the world, starting around the age of 3, in 2 hemispheres of the earth, all in one lifetime, at least up till now. To be fair, this didn't really bother me all too much when I was a lot younger. As being the energetic and naive kid that I was, the concept of home, friends, and identity were still very vague to me. Home was just the place I went back to at the end of every day. Friends were merely the people that were willing to play with me on the playground. And as for identity, well, I liked pizza. I still do, actually. However, as I grew up, I began to realize that there was a lot more complexity to these aforementioned concepts for me than I used to believe, and that was very confusing. I can clearly remember when I first came back to live in Shanghai after 8 years living abroad. Coming from the quiet suburbs of Virginia, the city that never blinks nor sleeps was a completely different environment for me. I was in 6th grade back then, and even though I was in a bilingual school, the majority of the classes were taught in Chinese, and I was not accustomed to that. Moreover, I was not used to the culture there, and that many times I felt like I had to be treated differently in order to compensate for this. People looked at me all weird when I had to explain that even though I look Chinese and I speak the language, I spent most of my life outside of the country. It made me feel as if I was a foreigner in the country that I was born in, and it was pretty clear to me that I didn't fit in at the beginning. It took me a while to adjust, but after a few years, I began to find an identity for myself there. I started to have a lot more friends who were close to me. I began to play music and even started a band. I would tell you guys to follow us on social media, but we never made it that far, so yeah. Then, one fateful day, I was told of the news that I would be moving to Canada. My heart dropped, and I was taken aback. I didn't want to leave the place I called home for another one, and neither did I want to leave the friends that had meant the world to me. Because when I had to do so the last time, for the longest time, I felt like I didn't have a home. And I felt like I didn't have any friends. Naturally, when I first arrived here, my immediate response was to distance myself, to don the facade of a shy, awkward kid that people find hard to make conversation with. And let me tell you something. I absolutely detest being in socially awkward situations. And I would have probably stayed this way had it not been for a certain unnamed individual who by a sheer coincidence became one of my closest friends here and helped me to break out of that shell. Now, at this stage, you may be expecting me to say something along the lines of how, with the help of my friends, my family, Applebee, my teachers, I feel like I'm home here now, and that I finally have somewhere to belong. No. Well, more like yes and no. See, if the issue were really that simple, then I would not be standing here addressing it today. Listen closely, because I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I still don't feel like I belong anywhere. The only difference between then and now is that I realized the solution to the problem isn't finding that perfect place where you can fit in completely, but it's to deal with the fact that you don't fit in anywhere and come to terms with it. So what if I'm constantly of the tipping scale of two worlds? It doesn't have to mean that I don't have a fixed home or culture, but it just means that I could be in two places with completely different cultures and I could still feel like home. It doesn't mean that I don't have a fixed identity, because the fact that I was stuck between two cultures in itself is a defining factor of who I am. I was different, but that's okay, because these differences make up who I am, and I'm proud to bring these differences and to show you the real me. And there's my Ronska reference, guys. Home, friends, and identity. Throughout my life, I've always found myself struggling with these three concepts. So, what are they to me now? Let's start with where my home is. Well, room 220 by the corner of 2nd Deck and Pole's house is a start. Or a place 10 minutes from the school. Or an apartment across from the Shanghai Children's Medical Hospital in Shanghai. It could be any of these places, and depending on what happens in the future, it could be anywhere else. Who are my friends now? They're the ones who ponder about life with you over a bowl of instant noodles. Those who I joke with about having no friends, most ironically. The ones who helped me look over and revise the speech. And the ones who leave me in tears after my graduation. Thank you so much for being there for me when I needed you the most, and you'll always be in my heart. Finally, in terms of identity, I still don't think I belong anywhere, but that's okay. Because while it is in our human desires to belong to something, we can't stay in one place forever, and neither can we be the same person forever. Not having a fixed home doesn't mean that I don't have one. It just means that I can go anywhere and make that my home. I know that I'm definitely not the only one in this room who's had countless nights pondering who I really was. The only difference between you and me is that your identities are split into many categories that are different from mine, all completely unique to you. Believe me, these are bound to change over time. To my senior ones in the room, you're nearing a stage in your life where you have to take a leap of faith into a completely new environment. It will ultimately present you with many challenges and tests that are bound to shape you as a person. Senior twos. That leap of faith is in a little less than 3 months. I'll be lying if I said that I wasn't scared of how it's going to affect who I am as a person. And that brings me back to the idea of identity again. After much thinking and calculating, I think I have it somewhat figured out. As of right now, I'm 30% of Chinese culture, 15% of American culture, and 15% of Canadian culture. I'm also 20% of a musician and 20% of a student. Ultimately, these numbers are bound to change, especially with the prospect of university and what's to come. But no matter what, I'll know that these numbers will always add up to be 100, and the reason for so is that I'll always be 100% human, and so will you. Now please rise and sing hymn 418.